This is a code explanation and testing demonstration for the database API server. The server runs in the Echo framework using Golang, which can be started here as shown in the terminal. Initially it runs out of the main function, so the Echo framework object is created here, and then we enable a cross-origin resource sharing here. We can then open and store our database object. The database is a MySQL database, and in order to open it we pass the password in as well as the IP localhost in this situation, as it is running on the same local machine as the API, and the port that the MySQL database is running on, as well as the database name itself, in this case the NEA game DB for database. We can check for errors here, and then defer the closing of the database to the end of scope. There are two methods used here, a post method and a get method. Both use an additional function here, which allows for an additional parameter, the database, to be passed into the methods used, rather than just the context provided from the framework based on the post or get request. For the get request, the get leaderboard method is used. This starts off by querying the database of a select all from leaderboard in order to get all of the data, and then checking for any errors and deferring closing of the query. The data object used is a leaderboard data object, which I've defined up here, which contains a map with a string key which represents the names of each player, as well as a leaderboard player value, leaderboard player being another struct defined which holds the 3 times for each player. So this object is created, and its empty map is passed into it. We then iterate through each line of the query, creating our variables, which currently hold no value for each value we need, and then we can scan the line of the query in order to get those 4 variables. We check that there are no errors and send an exception if there are one. And finally we can assign each of these values to a value inside of our map, with the name acting as our key and the leaderboard player containing each time. The data is then returned being formatted as JSON. The add leaderboard method is used for the post. Here we create our data object, same object is being used here, a leaderboard data object, and then the data passed in is bound to our data object. We then iterate through each name and execute a query where we insert into the leaderboard each value, or in the case of a duplicate key, we update our values. Once again we check for error, and then we return, in this case, no content, as there is nothing to be returned for this post. In order to test, the Postman API is used. This allows us to send both get and post requests. So here we have the IP address, port, and leaderboard in order to send a get request for leaderboard, and when we send, we see that the leaderboard is returned to us in JSON. We can then post. A post would take a form like this, very similar to what we have in the get, or what we receive in the get request. Here the post requires a name, which can be any name, and 3 times. Updating either of these just for demonstration. When we post this, we can now come over, resend another get request, and we notice that player 5 has been added with the times assigned to it.